Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Thursday night seminar. Tonight we are looking at change management for contractors post-COVID as the world slowly starts to return to work and the way in which we work is starting to change. We're going to be looking at what the new normal is and could be. Companies are re-evaluating everything at the moment in terms of their requirements. So what will this new normal look like? Now, I'm joined this evening by Shafiara Muttalib-Mehra, who is the Head of Strategy and Change at Silver Shemmings Ash. Good evening, Shafiara.
Hi, Julie.
Thank you for joining us. As always, we'll be asking, Shafiara and I will be having a chat about some questions, which you'll be giving us the answers to. If you've got any questions yourself, if you'd like to use the Q&A box in the bottom toolbar, and then at the end, when we've finished the questions we've got here, Shafiara, I'm sure, will be answering as many as she can from those submitted by the audience. So without any further ado, Shafiara, we've got some questions for you about change management in this current pandemic. So what are some of the challenges that businesses will face after COVID-19?
Thank you, Julie. It's a really good question, and it's likely that the COVID-19 crisis will have a great impact on a lot of the businesses, and many businesses will experience considerable losses. So one of the things that businesses need to be thinking about is sustainable cost reduction programs. An obvious area to look at in terms of cost is office space. From head offices to back offices, we're probably spending way more than we need to on our property. That's not to say that we won't need offices in the future. I definitely think we will, but we do need to relook at our space requirements. Previously, a lot of companies were against allowing their employees to work from home. And also, there was issues around technology and etc. But now with the amount of connectivity available and technology advances, what is proven is that there's very little difference between an employee working from the office and working from the home. The biggest challenge that companies are going to face around home working is around trust and how do they manage their staff remotely. But what this does give us is an opportunity with home working extending post-COVID. It gives us an opportunity to rethink of what our office space requirements are. So do you need the amount of office space you currently have? Do you need as many locations? It also gives us an opportunity to rethink about in terms of how offices are laid out. So moving away from the one-to-one desk ratio and thinking about being more flexible with our workspaces. Do people need their own offices within, could they move to open planned offices, and thinking about areas where you have desks to have hot desking, and also have more collaborative areas spaced out across the office, and only have meeting rooms for face-to-face meetings which need to take place. The challenge companies will also have is finding smaller office space in the areas that they currently are. What they might need to think about is sharing space in the future. Another area to consider when you're looking at your costs and reducing costs is actually looking at all your current expenses. And it is very easy to lose track of services, unused services or older leases. You need to identify what are your critical expenses and what are your non-critical expenses. And you'd find there are probably services which you're no longer using or subscriptions that you're no longer using. Even paying for phone lines, which you're probably for staff that left some time ago. But you need to really find out, which activities, if you stop paying for those, what activities are absolutely needed to keep the lights on and operate, and which ones are the nice to have. You'd probably find there are a lot of legacy contracts, as I've said, and you might be paying for equipment and services on products that you no longer use. So apart from phone lines, I'm thinking about printers. So, a lot of people pay for printers or have a lot of expensive contracts on printers, and you probably don't need them. And the fact is, if you're not using them, then you don't need them and you're wasting money. And if you are paying for certain services and products, look at the contracts and also shop around and see if you can find anything cheaper. Also, another area to look at is staff expenditure. Now, when times are good, you know, everyone had credit cards and people have been allowed to charge the firm back for things like travel and networking events and etc. But with, in light of COVID-19, we all need to look at our expenses. So really look at who has a credit card and what do they need it for. Obviously, travel expenses has gone down, but when we do reopen our offices, we need to think about, you know, is the travel essential? Can that meeting happen on Zoom? There's different ways of these meetings operating. Equally, training, marketing, or business development. Do we need to physically be face-to-face? Can these meetings take place via video conferencing? And you probably find there's quite a lot of savings to be made there. One of the areas which businesses will need to spend to save in the long term is around digital transformation. So investment in digital transformation can actually help reduce costs. And although in the short term, it will require some investment, and that's mainly because a lot of companies have underinvested in their technology in the past, and so they're playing catch up. In the long term, this will actually provide a framework for speed and cost efficiencies. And for some organisations, it'll actually allow you to remain ahead of the curve. Think about moving services online and automating back office functions. So in terms of online services, try identifying customer touch points. Does the customer need to access that service face-to-face or on the phone? If you move that service online, it's much lower cost, and equally, the customer can access the service when it suits them. In terms of back office functions, look at areas which can be, you need to look at areas which are quite manual and repetitive, and look at those processes so they can be streamlined and automated. And areas to look at would be within the finance area, HR or IT. And it doesn't actually have to be costly. This isn't new technology. There are a lot of online systems which can cover all areas of operation, including accounting, website hosting, marketing communication, payroll, IT. There's lots out there if you have a look. Now, as a last resort, and one that every organisation will also have to look at, and really it should only be as a final one, is look at your workforce. Staff cost is one of the biggest costs, and reducing staff costs will considerably reduce your operating cost. But you should only really look here at if you've exhausted all of the other options. But one of the things you need to ask yourself is, can you reduce the staff costs without sacrificing the quality of service? There might be areas where, for example, you're overstaffed anyway, and you probably knew that. This gives you an opportunity to streamline those areas. But identify what those key activities are and cut back on redundant services or services that you offer which don't give you a good return and don't add value to the customer. When you do something like this, though, you need to do it with sensitivity and do it in line with redundancy rules, ensuring that you consult with your staff.
Okay. So what are some of the key ways we will be working differently in the office post-COVID?
It's another good question, Julie, and one that a lot of businesses, including our own, are looking at now. You need to plan and ensure, you need to plan for that reopening of your office and returning to what it was like post-COVID. But we need to also ensure that we provide a safe working environment for our staff to return to. So to prepare your employees to return to the office, you need to be thinking about the office space itself. And one of the first things to do, and it's a good time to do it is now, is thinking about the cleaning regime. So look at decluttering your office. A lot of people treat their office like a second home. So whether it's shoes or clothes or whatever it is, people do store a lot of stuff in the office. Desks become personal spaces. So there are a lot of people who have personal items on the desk. Move to clear desk policies, clear desk policies, clear office policies. Give the office a deep clean before people return. People need to feel safe and that the environment is clean. Look at what the cleaning frequency is as well. So a lot of offices probably have their office cleaned once a day. Well, in the new world, that will need to be changed and increased. So especially like those shared spaces, so the restrooms, the kitchens, the meeting rooms, those areas which have a lot of traffic. And also just kind of, to give people that reassurance, leave lots of antibacterial wipes throughout the office. Another area to look at is seating. So obviously, do the sneeze test. The requirements are to kind of keep social distancing requirements are 1 metre apart. Think about if it's possible to keep the desk opposite empty, and also the desk to keep one desk apart. So just physically move those chairs away so that people are no longer be able to sit there. And if you do that, you'd be able to identify what the maximum capacity of the office will be. And a lot of organisations are thinking only 30% will go back anytime now. So perhaps think about introducing a office rota system. So divide the teams up between a team A and team B, and have some team A coming in for 2 weeks of the month, and then team B coming in. So just so that there's less traffic in the actual office. And also think about which staff need to return in. So, even if, you've got a sales team, do they all need to be in? You need to also think about just redesigning your space. So again, not everyone has the luxury of space. You need to think about how we can maintain physical distance within the office and restrict movement in congested areas such as kitchens and printer areas. Perhaps a one-way system might be useful for some businesses, and look at your signage as well. Some organisations, and this won't be appropriate for all, but some organisations may also consider system checks. So putting, online surveys to check people's symptoms, and also, if it's necessary, perhaps checking temperatures of staff as they return to the office.
Okay. So how can we support staff returning to work? Because particularly if you're dividing your working crew into teams, that can cause conflict and stress.
I think the first thing is you need to kind of consider when should they return to the office, and that would really depend on the type of business you have. A lot of organisations have actually seen that they can operate quite well from home. So is there a need to open up all areas of the business? So a lot of businesses are planning actually for September, and that's when the kids go back to school. The key is communicating with your staff and supporting people, asking them, what do they feel like? Do they need to go back? A lot of people will feel anxious about coming back into the office, and even if they want to come in, they'd be anxious about travelling in. And also being back into the workplace. So talking about everything that you're doing to make that workplace safe for them to come back to. It's really important though, during this period, that you actually listen to them. And there's lots of things that we think we thought about, but actually they will, our staff will throw something up that we haven't actually thought about. And also consider their personal circumstances, and that will be different for everyone. So some people, even if they want to come back, they won't be able to, because they may be living with someone who's shielding. Equally, and they may have childcare responsibilities. And equally, there are some people who frankly will be desperate to get back to the office. They enjoy the social element. They may also find that in terms of their work, they work better together face to face. It's, to be more creative with ideas and solve problems. So talk to your staff and find out what works for them. And when they do return to work, ensure that environment is safe. And for all the planning that we do, we need to be flexible in our approach and react to what they tell us. You also need to be flexible with people's start times and finish times. We need to avoid transport rush hour peaks. So that, be flexible, and they might want to come in a little bit later or a bit earlier, or leave equally. It'd be a staggered workforce. And I imagine that would be the future for some time. Again, alternate days and shifts, and which roles really do they have to be in at all? And then once they do return, make sure you constantly check in with them and see how they feel. And some people might feel okay about coming in, but they may change their mind once they see that the commute into work is still as busy as it was before COVID-19.
Okay, so obviously it seems that home working is set to continue, and in a much larger way than before. So how can we support staff working from home?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Before COVID-19, home working was possible for some roles, but it certainly wasn't a fixture. And employees need to actually justify why in a lot of companies, employees needed to justify why they needed to work from home, and the technology didn't necessarily support it. What COVID has taught us is that we're a lot more tech savvy than we thought we were. And a lot of companies actually have the technology which perhaps wasn't used. So you know, typically companies are now using video conferencing, collaboration tools, managing virtual teams, managing outcomes, and developing virtual relationships. And what's important post-COVID is actually that we don't lose all of those good practices, and we're doing it all now. So we shouldn't just revert back to the way we were before. And it's actually expected that in terms of home working, there should be at least be a 20% increase of businesses allowing their staff to homework. And in fact, some companies plan to permanently shift to remote working as well. But you do need a framework to determine which roles should homework and which shouldn't. And I suppose, you know, one of the ways to look at it is literally, you know, go through each of the activities and see what can be done at home and what can't. And if there is something, you know, there might be some roles, for example, that can work from home part of the time, might need to be in office part of the time, and that's a hybrid role. And then could be others which have activities which are perhaps a bit paper-based, a bit repetitive, which can't work from home today and operate to 100% because of technology issues. But as you digitalize your services and automate processes, they could probably work from home as well. So you need to identify what those barriers are. From an employee perspective, it's equally, you know, employees will there are some advantages for employees. Obviously, travel expenses, they're not paying for necessarily trains and petrol and parking. There's equally the issue about saving time and traveling into work. And there's costs associated with, you know, childcare, dry cleaning, and actually eating out. And from an employer's point of view, though, we do need to remember that there are challenges working from home, and a lot of it is around staff feeling disconnected from what's going on in the wider business. Communication as well, making sure that communication flow is there. And also pay attention to your staff's mental health and their well-being. Working from home can be very isolating, and there isn't any separation.
Okay, yeah, it's some people do thrive working from home. Others are climbing the walls, I would imagine, by now. Hot desking. You mentioned hot desking earlier. Obviously, that's very much reliant on the individual saying, I'm going to come in this day and that day. How easy is that to manage? Obviously, bearing in mind that we need to maintain social distancing.
Yeah, I mean, hot desking, I mean, different organisations do it in different ways. Where I've rolled it out previously, I've sometimes put it into zones. So give each team a zone. You need to work out what their requirements are first. So as I say, can those activities be done from home or not? And then once you identify which activities can be done from the office, you can work out a rota on which days people come in. So yeah, it's quite easy. There are also a lot of systems which help allow people to book in a desk when they want. But again, that depends on the size of organisation you have. And some of those booking systems do work well for larger organisations. Mm. For smaller organisations, you know, a rota system should be fine. Mm. And if organisations have locker spaces, then, you know, even pedestals, you don't need pedestals. You could just have lockers where people can actually keep their personal belongings.
Right. Okay. Also, companies of all sizes have trainees and apprentices, and they do learn a lot from conversations that are held in the office, and having the flexibility to ask questions throughout the day. You know, if you're working together in a team, it's much easier. How can you ensure that, you know, this support continues, particularly if they're having to work from home or come in at, you know, alternate times?
Yeah, I mean, that contact is really, really important for trainees, and I think it's going to be for each manager to work out days that they can actually meet face to face with their team. As great as online, as great as being to work from home, it's not the same as that support you get from face to face. It will be working out days that you can do that, and obviously making sure you have that regular touch points with staff. I've often run virtual teams, but had set days where I would go in with my team.
Okay, and obviously when you've got workers working from home, let's say splitting teams can be quite difficult. Would you suggest it's better to have sort of teams in at a time, and so you've got two different teams rather than split the team have team 1 and team 2 being all members of the same team in the same?
Not necessarily. No, it depends how your team works and how big your team is. So if you're a small team in a large office, then yes, you can come in and you can still maintain your social distancing. But if you're a large team, possibly not. You can just split the team. It really would depend. And I would only really say if you're having a large team, you don't need to come in as often as you need to. Video conferencing is a great way to still have team meetings. We've been doing it for the last few months and it's worked well. And actually, in many ways, for our organisation, at different levels, we've actually perhaps become a bit closer because it's been easier to get together using video conferencing.
So what other systems have you used to support workers during the lockdown, whether they were working or not? What else can you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, Teams has been great. I know everyone's had so there's been issues with different kind of platforms, but I've certainly found Zoom and MS Teams internally working well. Even using WhatsApp to kind of have that quick chat with people has been really good as well. What I would say is don't go out and invest in lots of other new platforms for your teams to work. You've probably got quite a good platform already. Perhaps think about how people are actually using it. A lot of people that have been resistant to using video conferencing or even WhatsApp have suddenly found actually it's not as complicated as they thought it was.
Yeah.
We've had MS Teams for some time now and not used it particularly well, but now that we've been forced to, we're all using it quite well. And what we mustn't do is we mustn't lose those good habits when we open up our offices. Yeah.
Okay. You've also got various. There's lots of different ways to obviously communicate with people, but there's also lots of resources online with information on all aspects of running a company and the problems and resources that you might find. What would you particularly recommend as places for people to go and have a look if they've got questions about anything to do with COVID in terms of whether it's staffing or space or contracts or social distancing or whatever it is? Are there resources online that are better than others?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend HMRC as a first point of call. I mean, the advice is changing and sometimes the guidance isn't necessarily complete, but it's a good place to start. And if you are looking at your staffing and making those kind of changes in terms of from a personnel point of view, definitely look at CIPD website as well and have a look at employee rights. So ACAS, have a look at those. I mean, we're in a situation now which we've never been in before. But some organisations, just to survive, they will have to make some dramatic changes, and it's never pleasant. And it doesn't really matter how you do it. It's never a nice thing to do. But we can do it. There is a right way of doing it, and we need to make sure that we do it in line with the guidelines that are available.
So obviously, one of your big things today then has been communication.
At
all levels for all.
Yeah, I mean, with anything you do, whether you're, returning to the office or you're staying, you're remote working, you're continuing with your workforce, you do need to communicate with your staff, find out what they want. I mean, even at the point when you're thinking, okay, we can extend remote working up until Christmas, which a lot of large organisations have announced they will do. The fact is that it's not suitable for everyone. And some people live alone and for their mental well-being, they do want to be in the office. And some people need that time to get away from home life as well. And they need escapism just to go in. And people's personal circumstances are different. And the only way you will know what it is if you actually speak to them. So listening to your staff is really key and trusting them as well.
Okay. So any other top tips from you for companies looking at going back to the office and starting to work out what their new normal will be?
Be flexible. Don't think you've got a plan and this is defined plan. It's new for everyone. It's a new world for us all, and we just need to be flexible for our approach. And so that would be my top tip. Don't think you've got all of the answers because you haven't. And speak to your staff again, because as much as you might think that you've exhausted every kind of cost saving strategy, someone else may have a better idea.
Okay, brilliant. That's great. Thanks, Shafiara, for your time. That's very much appreciated. We've got through all those questions there, so thank you very much. The video will be up on our YouTube channel and on our website, so you can always review this again. And in the meantime, stay safe, everyone, and we hope to see you online at one of our seminars again soon. Thank you all for turning up and tuning in tonight. Thank you, Shafiara.
Thank you.